The following program is a Town of Colonie television production of the William K. Sanford Town Library.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, I can't tell you why. Seasons spinning round again, the years keep rolling by.
Good afternoon, or good morning, good evening. I'm Joe Doolittle, and this is Story by Story, a program celebrating the human experience. And that's what stories do in our lives, whether we're telling them at our kitchen tables, whether we're watching them on television, or whether we're listening to a play or some other adventure that words are weaving their way within our souls, because most stories have a soul-wide dimension. My partner, Kate Dudding, is sick today, so I'm trying to man this studio, or person this studio, all by myself, except for our guest storyteller, who is Siri Allison. And Siri Allison has joined us all the way from up north in Salem, and I'm ever in Siri's debt, because among the other accomplishments that she's had in storytelling is producing a series of storytelling just like we do at Proctor's up in Salem. Siri, welcome so much. It's nice to have you here.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
We'll do your interview, but I was just so taken by that kind of step up to the plate a couple years ago when you said, could we have a celebration up here? And you had some connections that you made. How did that all come together up there, by the way?
Well, that's due to you and Kate, actually.
Well, yeah. It was more you.
No, it was that I enjoy the Proctor's wordplay so much, and I know how much work I put into a story when we tell it down there. And so everybody's putting all this work into one afternoon, and they were getting really good. So I said, well, why do it just one afternoon? We could do it the next week in Salem at Fort Salem Theater, which is a beautiful theater if anybody wants to come to that theater, and it has a little cabaret that's such a nice cozy space.
Cozy space.
And why don't we just do it again the next week? However, it has turned out that some people can't do both weeks or whatever, but at least half the people do the same. And then in order to grow the local audience, each time I would invite one local to tell, and then they'd bring their friends and neighbors to hear them, and they'd understand what storytelling is, and then hopefully they come back.
And it's grown, and it's successful, and it really isn't like we do reruns up in Salem. We do a whole new...
But the idea is part of the do reruns, because why not take the show on the road?
Right.
Now, and the other thing is that it has grown because of Margaret and Betty's class,
right,
and because of Janine's class, so there are people in the area who've taken their classes who then want to come tell. And so it's not me.
Margaret French, Betty Cassidy, and Janine Laverty are storytellers who are also up on the north side of our service area, but they're in Saratoga. They aren't in Washington County, but there's some overlap there, so that the nexus of storytellers from our northern brothers and sisters is really part of that effort up there. And the series in Salem at the Fort Salem Theater runs in the fall.
Only in the fall.
Only in the fall. And you can get all the information about that coming up at our website, www.storycircle@Proctor's, in case you're interested in driving up and having a wonderful lunch up in Salem or in the environs there, enjoying the fall colors and getting a little dose of soul-sized stories at the Fort Salem Theater.
Yes.
Isn't that cool? That's cool. Well, I've had one of the nicer adventures in my storytelling life. About twice a year, I tell stories with Kent Bushman and Harlan Ratmeyer, who are two clergy friends of mine, and we call ourselves Three Spirits. And we did a program last month on Three Spirits and Tales of Wonder. And it was a part of a program we were doing in our denomination, the Reformed Church, about caring for creation. And we just had a blast. And Kent got to tell some camp stories. I got to tell a story about swimming across a dangerous creek for the first time. And my wife actually got to tell. Gay has taken a composting course, and we've begun to turn our whole church into kind of green. So we're composting anything we can. And she gave a presentation on composting. So there you go. That was what we were doing.
I've never seen you in person, but I have some of your CDs.
Oh,
the Three Spirits, and they're fun.
We have fun. We have fun. We have fun. We have fun. So storytelling is alive and well in this area. Again, our website is storycircle@proctors.org, and there you'll find a lot of backgrounds on our various productions, on open mics in Saratoga and in Schenectady, and a list of members and the results of this storytelling program are available on our YouTube channel, which you can get to from that website. And there's almost 200 stories from guest storytellers from the past couple of years. So when TV gets dull, hit that website. Siri, you're going to have to help me with this a little bit. I know where you live. I've eaten your brownies. I've listened to you tell stories, but I really don't know how the storytelling talent was discovered in you. How did you become a storyteller?
Well, I have a background in theater, and then my children were born, and my husband was working very long hours, and I didn't want to go off on tour or be out at rehearsal every night, so quit. And then my daughter was in second grade, I guess, and one of her friends had a mother who was a violinist who was doing violin for the class, and she said, why don't you come tell a story to go with my violin playing? And I went and told a story, and
wow,
that was it.
That was
and then
it,
I did that year a whole once a week curriculum, stories around the world for that class, and then I went back the next year and did a different theme once a week and went into other classes, and there we go.
There you go.
There we go.
So it was the coincidence of the other mother with the violin saying, come on and tell a story. And because you had a little confidence in front of an audience, even though they were kids, which would have frightened me to death.
I didn't know enough to be frightened at that point.
Didn't know enough to be, well.
Or maybe I was.
Maybe you weren't and just got over it. That's true. We always get stage fright. So that was the beginning. Now, in terms of finding Story Circle or doing things for adults, how did that happen?
Well, we moved up here, and I had been telling in the schools down there, so I thought I would like to tell in the schools up here. So I went to I don't know what it's called, but BOCES runs a day for PTA people.
Right.
And there was Kate at a table with all your things laid out on the table. And she said something about telling for middle schoolers. And I said, I'm afraid of middle schoolers.
Middle schoolers are big people.
And
yes.
Kate said, oh, it's easy. All you have to do is go in, and the first thing you say is, I am so glad you all are not little kids, because little kids can't handle a scary story like this. Then you tell them the goriest story you know, and they're eating out of your hand from then on.
Nothing like blood and guts, I always say. Get those 8th graders really on your side.
That's right.
Man, I'll tell
So
you.
from then on, I met Kate, and I came to one of the...
Okay, that's a wonderful introduction. You met Kate. In terms of the kinds of stories that you tell, you've got some areas that you seem to like better than others. What are those?
Somebody asked me that the other day, and I can't quite put my finger on it. Sorry to say.
You're kind of the smorgasbord of stories.
Yes.
Well, that's
well,
fun.
I like literary stories, but I haven't been telling many of them lately. I like the language.
I like the language.
And I like stories with a little kick at the end. And because of the schools, I will read a lot of folktale books looking for ones with a certain
edge.
Yes, and then in the meantime I find, oh, that's good, and then I Xerox them away for later.
Right, when you go scouting for stories, you find a lot of stuff that you didn't think you'd ever need, and then you find yourself using it. Yeah, that's part of the process for sure, for sure. What we'd like to do is we'd like to talk about stories. We'd like to listen to stories. And so if you could tell us a story, then we could talk a little bit about the story that you tell. But to do that, we have to hear your story.
All right.
Don't we?
Well, I'd like to start because I'd like to tell you about my 5th grade peacekeeping class that I'm starting. Yes, or this is will be my 4th year in the 5th grade at a certain school where I'm developing this series of peacemaking stories, and this is my lead-off story for that course. All right, this is called Slugadog, and it was collected by Verna Ardema. And she tells that in a book called Tales from the Story Hat. All right. Once there was a rich man. Now, this particular rich man had gotten rich by cheating. He took advantage of everybody in any business deal and just stayed on this side of the law. But because he was so cutthroat, he didn't have any friends. But he was very rich. And he lived, as most people in the Congo did, which is where this story is from, in a family compound of huts. There was a hut for him, a hut for each of his wives and her children, and there were many wives, so there were many huts. And then there were a few huts for the servants, and huts for cooking, and huts for storing things, grain and dried meat and fish and pumpkins and gourds, and a hut for the tools, and a hut for fixing things, and a hut for the accounting. Many huts. And this is where you see how rich he was. The whole compound was surrounded by an ivory fence. Now, this rich man loved to eat. Every day about 4 o'clock, he would come out and sit under this tree that grew near the gate of his ivory fence. And the wives would come parading out of the cooking hut, each one with a pot, a basket, a platter, a dish of something on her head. And they would bring it over and they would set it down before him. And then they would back up and kneel and watch as he ate. He didn't share with them. He didn't share with the children. He didn't have any friends, so he never had any visitors. He always ate alone. And then, when he was done, the wives and the children and the servants could have the leftovers. Now, this one particular day, the wives were bringing out of the cooking hut baked elephant's foot and rice balls with peri-peri pepper sauce and fried locusts. And I don't know if you know this, but baked elephant foot smells delicious. And the smell of this wonderful, delicious food wafted up over that ivory fence and out into the town. Now, at just that moment, a dog, Slugadog, was coming into town, and the smell of that elephant's foot, baked elephant's foot, hit his nose. Now, he was very hungry. He had just passed through several days of the hungry country, where deserty, he hadn't found anything to eat. He was seriously hungry. And when this smell hit his nose, it drew him like a magnet. He followed the smell of that food until his nose was pressed through the bars of that ivory gate. Ooh, there was the man with all that food. Slugadog couldn't help it. He was drooling, and he was wagging his tail. He was a very polite dog. Nobody paid attention to him, so he began to ask very politely for the food. There he stood, drooling, wagging his tail, and whining just a little, very politely, until the man looked up. Oh, look at that nuisance of a dog. Wife, get rid of that dog. And so the wife got up and she shooed away the dog. Well, Slugadog that night went through the town looking for food in the trash, but the people in that town were very frugal. There was not much food in the trash. So the next day, he was still very hungry. When out of the cooking hut, the wives brought fried fish and baked pumpkin and all kinds of good food, and the smell wafted through the town and drew Slugadog until he stood with his nose pressed through the bars of that ivory gate, drooling and wagging his tail and whining. Ah! Said the man, wife, get rid of that dog. And wife number 2 got up and she shooed away Slugadog. And the next day also he was having yam and snake stew and all kinds of good things. Drooling, wagging his tail, whining. Well, finally, one day, after several days of this, the rich man got a length of rope. And when Slugadog came back to the gate, he opened the gate. Slugadog came in, and the man wrapped the rope around his neck and dragged him off to the town elders. Arrest this dog, he said. Arrest the dog, said the town elders. Why? He's been stealing the aroma of my food. I demand a trial. Well, the town elders weren't at all sure about this, but in that town, if you demanded a trial, you got a trial. So they sent for the judge. Well, it took a few days for the judge to arrive. Finally, he came and he sat under the tree of justice. There was the tree, the judge, the town elders, the rich man, Slugadog, and a lot of the people in the town, because they had by now all heard about this strange case. And I have to tell you, they were mostly on the side of the dog because a lot of them had been cheated by the rich man. Well, the judge now, he wasn't taking sides because he knew it was his job as a judge to be impartial and listen very carefully. And so the rich man explained how the dog had been coming to steal the aroma of his food. Slugadog could only say, Well, the judge thought a while, and then he said, it's clear to me that the dog is guilty. He wasn't just walking by and happened to smell the food. No, he came every day on purpose to stand there and smell the food. He's guilty of stealing. Now, if he had just stolen once, the answer would be easy. We would just throw him out of town the way we throw out anyone who has stolen. But he came every day. He has stolen often. This is going to have to be a special punishment. I'll need time to think about it. Come back tomorrow. So the people left. The next morning, there they are. The judge under the tree. Oh, there they are. The people, the rich man, Slugadog, the elders, no judge. They're waiting and waiting for the judge. Finally, here he comes, riding on a horse. Now, a horse was very unusual in this part of the world. They said, Judge, why are you riding a horse? Oh, he said, just because. And he got off the horse and he came and he sat down under the tree. The punishment, he said, will be as follows. The accuser, and he pointed to the rich man, shall beat the accused, and he pointed to the dog, until he is dead. The crowd gasped. Slugadog cowered. The rich man smiled and he picked up a stick. Now wait, said the judge. The crime and the punishment have to match. Everyone, and he's speaking now to the crowd, do you agree that the aroma is the spirit of the food? Yes, said the people, you could say that. The aroma is the spirit of the food. And, said the judge, do you say that the spirit of the dog is what must then be punished? Well, yes, yes, said the people. And, said the judge, would you say that the spirit of the dog resides in his shadow? Yes, said the people, yes, the spirit of the dog could be represented by his shadow. The judge said, so it is the shadow of the dog that must be punished. You, and he pointed to the rich man, must beat the shadow of the dog until it is dead. But you must not touch the dog. We will agree that the shadow is dead when the sun is straight overhead and you can see no shadow. The sun was low in the sky. It was early in the morning, and the shadow was long, and the rich man had to begin to beat that shadow. Now, he wasn't used to physical labor. He got very tired, very hot. He began to sweat. Every time he hit the ground, little puffs of dirt came up and stuck to the sweat. He got dirty, and as the sun got higher and higher, the shadow got smaller and smaller until he had to put his arm next to the dog so he wouldn't hit the dog, and then he struck his own arm. In a rage, he threw down the stick and he stomped through the crowd and he jumped on the judge's horse and he galloped off on the street that led out of town. Where's he going? Said the people. I don't know, said one of the elders, but I don't think he'll be back, because if he came back, we would have to throw him out of town for stealing the judge's horse. And that is the end of the story.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And now, where did you find that story again?
I found it in a huge collection of children's stories, but it says that they found it in a book called Tales of the Story Hat collected by Verna Ardema.
My. That's a
But
great
it's very
story.
similar to many other stories you've heard, right? That's a theme in
The
stories.
theme about the rich man. Of course, you might even say that there's a little bit of a contemporary spin on that one, but I'm not going to go there on.
Yeah.
But would that we could get him on a horse out of town. But at any rate, we'll see. Now, tell me a little bit about the program you're doing with the fifth graders, because that sounds very interesting and intriguing. And it's geared around the concept of peace.
Peacemaking.
Peacemaking.
Conflict resolution.
Really?
Yeah, I wish I had a degree in conflict resolution. However, I've thought about it a lot, and I've read a lot of stories. And with this one, I say to the kids, this is my lead-off story, and then we act it out. So I bring costumes and things. So we have a dog and a horse and, wives parading out, and that's fun.
Oh, that's fun.
That's fun. So then I say, all right, so what would we have said if the rich man had been able to have killed the dog? I mean, this way the story feels very satisfying.
Yeah.
But if it hadn't ended up this way, it would have felt wrong. And why is that? And immediately they say, well, it wouldn't have been fair. It's not fair. So I say, I think I'm correct about this, that almost all conflict in the world, not all of it, but a good sizable chunk is because it's not fair. From a 3-year-old who says her cookie's bigger than mine to the Revolutionary War, which they've studied, no taxation without representation, it's not fair. So then we talk about, well, if you fight over it, is that going to actually make it fair? Is that going to solve the problem? So then we go from there.
Wow.
That's the beginning.
And how long does your time with the students go? I mean, was it several weeks or?
Well, I'm coming up with more and more material, and I'm thinking of trying to do what I used to do, and that's go once a week, but for however long it takes. Right now, it's a 5-day thing.
Okay.
That's the opening assembly, and then I have 45 minutes to an hour every day during that week for the rest of it.
And you do this as kind of the resident storyteller in the school for that week?
Yes.
That's a great gig.
Yeah, isn't it?
And you get to both do the formal stuff you're doing and all the informal connections with the kids, I bet. Mm-hmm. Oh, man.
Yeah,
wow.
that's great.
That's super.
That's great.
And I bet they love you. I bet they love you.
Well, it's fun to act out the story, so I make sure I bring one every day for us to act out.
the stories. And when you act out a story that way, it's a little bit, it's different than what people call improv, because the kids aren't actually making up the story, but they're making up all the rest of it.
Right.
In terms of how they dance or how they stand or how they do that stuff.
Yes.
Oh, man. And they probably say, oh, we had the most fun in school today.
I hope
Mrs.
so.
Allison was with us, and
so.
she just did this wonderful story.
I hope so.
Wow. Well, Allison, we're going to come back to you. I want to do a little review of what's going on with storytelling in the area, because there's a fair amount of stuff going on, and I'm just going to highlight that, and then we'll come back and do another story. If I can get on this. And I've got to do my technology to get my stuff. One of the really neat programs we have in the area is at the Irish American Heritage Museum, and it's Shawnee Evenings. And the Shawnee was the old Irish itinerant storyteller who would come along and knock on a door, and for an evening's meal and a lodging, he would entertain the neighborhood with stories. That was a Shawnee. And our Shawnee teller on March 9th coming up is Lorraine Harton Gilardi, and she's from down in Dutchess County, and she's a wonderful teller, and it's Tales from a Rambling House. And she grew up in a big Irish family, and I think that's going to be the nature of that story. Following that, on Sunday of that same weekend, on the 11th, is one of our programs at Proctor's. It's Word Plays. And Word Plays is just a themed storytelling event, and this theme is one about always, ? And it's about love and maybe not love. And we've got Christy Keegan and Claire Beetlestone and Eva Neves and Kate Dudding, Marnie Gillard. Nancy Marie Payne and Sandy Schumann. And that will be a good evening rather. It's at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, actually, in the gallery, second floor of Proctor's, above the box office lobby. And it's a great place to listen to stories. And we have some wonderful, scrumptious eats and drinks at intermission. And if you get there a little early, you can graze through the Schenectady Green Market, which is on the first 2 levels of Proctor's Theater. So we commend that to you because it's just great fun. We run a couple of open mics. One is up in Saratoga at Cafe Lena, and the featured teller is our own Kate Dudding this time, and that goes from 7 to 9. And if you haven't been in the renovated Cafe Lena, please get up to a show. It is just the most vibrant space, still with some of that old panache of Lena's spirit there, but very well done. I think the food might be a little better than it was in the old days. At least the brownie I had the last time I was there was really good. And there'll be Kate doing about a half an hour set, and then there's an hour and a half of other storytellers who will sign up and do that. We have another storytelling program in Schenectady on the 6th of March with Christy Keegan telling the stories from social justice. And that's in Arthur's Market and Cafe, which is down at the corner of North Ferry Street and Front Street in the historic stockade. A quaint little place for dinner, desserts, listening, and we commend that to you as well. The other thing we do as storytellers is we meet together to kind of refine our own work and to connect. And we do that at Story Circle meetings. And our next one is the 20th of March on a Tuesday night right here in the Colonie Library. It goes 6 to 8 o'clock. And we encourage you, if you want to get a sense of what we're doing in storytelling, just show up and don't be afraid to tell. More than welcome to listen and get on our mailing list and find out a little bit more about what's going on. It's what we do. There's another group that we're related to, and it's called the Interfaith Story Circle. And the Interfaith Story Circle is renowned in this area for bringing together an ecumenical base of houses of faith to share their traditions through story. And they've got a program that's going to be kind of significant, we think. It's the power of story to welcome a stranger. And the featured teller to set that theme is Nolan, who's a member of our guild and has been very active in a number of social issues, the environment being the big one on her agenda. And it's at the University at Albany Interfaith Center, which is right on the campus, and there's parking right across the street. So please think about that. And it's 7 to 9 on the 21st of March. The power of story is important for a lot of other things, and it's the theme of this year's program for the Interfaith Story Circle. There's their website, withourvoice.org. If you're at all interested, please check that out. And if you're a congregation looking for some program, I would commend the Interfaith Story Circle to you, as well as our own Story Circle at Proctor's, because many of us are working in educational or faith communities ourselves. And that's what's going on in storytelling. And keep in mind that same website, www.storycircle at Proctor's, is available for you to just check out those other stories that have come from this show. Oh, there is one other program I gotta kind of make a pitch for, and it's at it's at Clifton Park, and it's Kate Dudding doing an acts of kindness in terms of how strangers either get greeted and welcomed or look to be masters and beacons of hospitality in their lives. And it's on the Clifton Park Library on Moe Road, and we would love to have you go out and take in some of Kate's wonder and kindness. And there we go.
I have a question.
You have a question?
Is Children at the Well going to be in action this spring?
Children at the Well, which is a program of the Interfaith Story Circle, is meeting, and they're getting a new group of kids from various faith communities together, and I think they've targeted a program in May for their showcase of having these young kids work with various stories of faith. And it's a great program, and we'll have that date for you at another meeting, but I don't have it right here. It's hard to remember everything, you know. I mean, it's not hard, it's hard.
I'm sure you don't have to have the May date to know you want to get started in February.
Particularly the short-term memory. Oh, man, I tell you. Well, I think I was thinking as I was listening to your story and your description of the workshops you're doing, I think it's inspired to bring those skills to kids, to bring an understanding of what conflict root is. Sometimes you can't deal with it unless you can describe it, and that stories are a little bit more neutral than saying, well, I'm a bully, you know, which is part of the other equation. So I really commend you for doing that. I think that's wonderful. And can you just go back and give us a little bit more of a, how did that idea find you to do that kind of storytelling in the schools?
Well, starting in the second grade there, then I had all kinds of different curriculum trying to meet the New York learning standards. So I had a series of around the world where we had different cultures, and I had a character building series, and I had a history series that American history never quite got off the ground, and had a kindergarten series where we would, the acting out was an especially important part of that, to give them more verbal skills and listening skills. And So you were actually stimulated a bit by the standard curriculum in terms of how to adapt that to meet the situation that you were in? It was sort of a chicken and egg. Chicken and egg, I could think about what do I want to do and where does it fit in. But with this one, for the fifth grade, some fifth grade teachers contacted me and said, could you do a program? And I said, yes, what do you want? And they said, well, bring us some ideas. So I brought, that was on the list, and they said, well, how about that one? And that was the one I really wanted to do. So, and at that time, it wasn't as much a part of the curriculum for them as it is now. So it fits right in now. But they don't do it until after their testing is done. It's sort of a bonus? Fun thing in May, after their testing is done. Well, I asked the question because I'm always curious about how the right niche gets discovered by an artist. And, you know, that sounds like a good story about how that happened. Now, do you have another story for us? Well, I brought two more, but one is like a minute. So we'll do the short one and we'll talk about it. All right. So after we do the Slugadog, and we talk a little bit about all conflict isn't bad, because you have to have some conflict in order to change and grow. You know, how is something ever going to get better if you don't say, well, this isn't right? And that's going to cause a little conflict. So it's not that conflict is bad, but it's the way that we handle it that makes it helpful or unhelpful. And so here's a story about, this is an Aesop's fable, about one way to handle what's not fair, which is what we set up in the other story. So once there was a rug merchant, and this is a long time ago now, before taxis and trains, he hired a donkey with a man who owned the donkey, who would lead the donkey, to carry his rugs to a neighboring town where he was going to sell them. Now, the way between one town and another led through a sort of desert area where there was a lot of sand and scrub brush and a very bright sun. And after a while, they were hot and tired, and they stopped to rest. So the owner of the donkey sat in the coolest place available, which was the shadow. There we go with the shadow again. Yeah. The shadow of the donkey. Well, the merchant looked at the owner of the donkey sitting there, and he said, I paid for the use of the donkey for this time. Now, I paid for it, so that's my shadow for now. You get up, I'm going to sit down. And the owner of the donkey said, you paid for us to carry your rugs to the neighboring town, but this is my donkey, it is my shadow, and I'm going to sit here. And so the two began arguing, and the argument grew until it came to blows, and they were in the middle of a fist fight, and while they were fighting, the donkey ran away. That's the end of the story. You mean so they fought
and consequently they lost the benefit of having the shadow to even think about.
Exactly. So did fighting help them solve this problem?
Wow, that's pretty profound. And the kids get that point right away, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, good for them and good for you. Oh man.
Good for Aesop, right?
Good for Aesop, right?
Yeah.
Good for Aesop. Well, wisdom is a development of kind of experience and knowledge, and I suppose something as long-standing as Aesop qualifies on both counts.
Right. I read something, I don't remember where and who said it, but there are no people 1,000 years old, but there are words
There are
1,000 years old.
There are there you go.
Some of them,
there
right.
you go. There you go. And I suppose someday there'll be video clips. God bless us on that one. Oh my mind! I hadn't thought of that. I love Lucy. No, and so that's when that happens. You've got a kid being the donkey, and you've got the kid being the merchant, and the kid being the owner of the donkey.
Right.
And do you have a son coming by to make a shadow?
I hadn't thought of that yet.
Oh, well, I'm just thinking about it in
That's
terms
an idea.
in terms of building perspective. Well, that's what. Are you going to tell another story from the same string?
I was hoping to.
Well, that would be good. We've got a little time. We may have a little bit more time.
All right.
So please keep the stories coming.
All right, this one is called 5 Eggs, and it is from Ecuador, collected by Pleasant de Spain in a book called Tales of the Emerald Lizard.
Tales of the Emerald Lizard.
Yes.
And Pleasant de Spain is a storyteller who is from Troy.
Is he?
Yeah, he's from Troy, New York. He grew up in Troy. He came back a little while ago and then left again. He's very well known internationally. So
Yes, he has several books
But
out
he was in Troy for a fair bit of time.
Where is he now?
I think he's moved to Florida, but he was here.
So you know him?
I've met him. Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah. Neat, and a great teller, and one of those oracle type of resources in our business of what he knows about storytelling and about stories. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw another place that this was collected or recorded by Harold Kurlander. Is that his name?
Kurlander, yeah.
Yeah, so he's another one of those guys.
Yeah.
So they both had collected this story. And I've actually put my own little spin on it.
Well, there you go. Let's hear your spin on Pleasant de Spain. Yes.
All right. So, once there was a couple, a wife and a husband, Esme and Jorge. And they were very poor. So poor, in fact, that they often did not have enough to eat. One morning they got up, and for breakfast they ate the last little bit of rice they had left over from the night before. And they were still hungry. So Esme went to the pouch where they kept their money, and she knew how much was in there, 2 pennies, but she dumped it out hoping there'd be more. 2 pennies. She picked them up. Jorge, she said, why don't you take these 2 pennies to the market and buy us an egg? It'd be something healthy and different and would maybe sustain us until tomorrow. What do you think? Jorge said, I think it's a great idea. He took the 2 pennies, he put them in the pocket of his raggedy old coat, and he set out for the market. When he got there, he was almost sorry he had come, because there were peppers and papayas and melons and pineapples, so beautiful and colorful, and somebody was selling somewhere a soup or a stew that just smelled delicious, and he couldn't afford any of it. So he made his way to where he knew the egg seller was. The egg seller was a man that he knew named Juan. And there was Juan just about to fall asleep behind the crate where he had set up his eggs. That gave Jorge an idea. He said, Juan, why don't you go home and take a nap, and I'll stay here and sell your eggs for you, and you could pay me by giving me 2 eggs. Oh, that's a good idea, said Juan, and he went home to take a nap. Well, Jorge took the 2 eggs he'd been promised very carefully, put them in his pockets, and then began enthusiastically to sell eggs. Eggs! Come buy your eggs! Fresh, delicious eggs! Well, before you know it, he had sold all the eggs. And when Juan came back, He said, Jorge, you did such a good job. I brought these 3 additional eggs planning to sell them, but here, you take them. You certainly deserve them. So now how many eggs does Jorge have?
5.
5 eggs. So, very carefully holding these 3 with the 2 in his pocket, he walked home as fast as he could to Esme, got in the door. Esme, I have 5 eggs. Jorge, 5 eggs! She took them and put them in a pot of water, put the pot on to boil. She watched them carefully. When they were done, she peeled them. She put them on the plate in the middle of the table. Jorge, they're ready! And he came and sat down. Now, she said, 2 for you and 3 for me. Esme, said Jorge, I'm the one who went to the market and did all the work to get these eggs. I should have 3 for me and 2 for you. Esme said, it was my idea. And you got the interesting job of going to the market while I had to sit home bored and wait for you. And besides, I cooked them. 3 for me and 2 for you. Esme, if I don't get 3 eggs, I'm going to walk out that door and I'm never coming back. Jorge, if I don't get 3 eggs, I'll die. 3 for me, he said. To his great surprise, Esme stood up and she died. Oh, said Jorge, Esme's dead. Guess I'll have to go scrounge up some wood and make her a coffin. So he went out and found some scrap wood and brought it home and began to hammer together a coffin. As he did, he said, too bad Esme's dead. Poor Esme. She should have been happy with 2 eggs. And from right there beside him on the floor, he heard, I want 3. So he finished the coffin, and he went and he got the neighbors, and they helped him put Esme in the coffin. And as he hoisted it up to his shoulder, he said, too bad Esme wasn't happy with 2 eggs. From inside the coffin, he heard, I want 3. They carried the coffin to the graveyard, set it down. The neighbors began to dig, and Jorge got out his hammer and the nails. He said, time to hammer on the top. At the first blow of the hammer, the top sprang off and Esme sat up. All right, she said, you can have 3 eggs. That's better, said Jorge. And they went home and they sat down at the table. The eggs, of course, were still on the table. Jorge took an egg. Esme, you're a good cook. Esme took an egg. Jorge, you did a good job getting us these eggs. Jorge took another egg. Esme, you're a good sport. Esme took another egg. Jorge, you made me a nice coffin. Oh, look! A spider! As Jorge turned around to look, Esme grabbed the last egg and stuffed it in her mouth. 3 for me is all, she said.
Hello. Now
we act that one out, and that's fun.
I was going to say, everybody wants to be the wife, right? It would be Esme, right? Right. Oh. So let me get the politically correct spin on this. The guy is the one that's afraid of the spiders.
Well, I started to look that up because it might say a tarantula.
Oh, okay.
It's not just any old spider. This is Ecuador, but I wasn't sure it was a tarantula, so I just said spider.
Okay. But and then the woman, by guile, gets her way.
Yes.
Now, when the kids talk about the story, what's their take on it? What's their dialogue?
Well, unfortunately, I don't give them I say, how could they have handled this better? And I get a range of answers. The best one, I think, is that they said is they could have scrambled the eggs.
They could have scrambled.
And then they would have split it in half.
Ah.
But now this story doesn't always, you laughed, but that is a difficult thing as a storyteller. When they were acting it out, I was trying to see how could we make them laugh, and I had them do the ending several times. You had to take a beat and then do that, but I was never satisfied with the ending, so I actually made up a new ending.
Well,
you want to hear that?
Well, would we like to hear the alternative ending? I think there's a yes from the audience.
Oh, you think so? Well, and I had a little help from Christy Keegan with this.
Oh, okay. Well, a good coach is always in the picture.
All right. So she stuffs the egg in her mouth. 3 for me was all she said. Jorge got up from his chair. He stalked to the door. He opened the door. And there was a little boy. Who are you? He said. I'm Juan's son. My daddy sent me to say you did such a good job selling those eggs that he'd like to offer you a job. You and your wife could live over the chicken house and he would pay you and you could have all the eggs you want to eat. Jorge looked at Esme. I'm not a good sport, she said, but I am a good cook. He smiled and held out his hand, and together they went with the little boy.
Oh, that's actually, you could have the kids make up.
That was where that came from.
That was where that came
But
from.
I can't remember whether we actually got to making up a new one. I mean, we have a time crunch there because I have, like a lot of stories each time. But
yeah, well, gee whiz, that's quite good. And how many kids are in your class when you're doing this?
Oh, there are 4 classes of 20 kids maybe.
Wow.
I go from class to class.
20 kids, 4 classes. Wow, that's so you're inoculating about 80 kids with the nature of story and basically being the interpreter of life.
That's the idea. I mean, that's what stories are about, right?
Yeah,
I've just chosen these.
Yeah.
But the subject is so huge. That's why I say I wish I'd taken classes in conflict resolution. There is a girl from their school who now, I think she's getting a doctorate in peace studies in Sweden, and she wrote me about, I wrote to her, and because I use her as an example to the students of what they could do in their future lives, or now, we talk about what could you do, and she talks about conflict transformation. As you take a conflict, you don't just try to solve the conflict, you try to change it into something good. So there's all kinds of, you could spend a year or more with the kids every day working on this stuff.
Have you ever gone back to the BOCES clearinghouse, where you met Kate the first time with that curriculum to kind of see if you get people to adapt it? Because since you've got it done, it sounds, given the present turmoil,
I almost give up.
Well, it's interesting. We've got about 12 minutes, so we've got a little time here. I just got back from Costa Rica.
Oh.
And Gay and I were traveling with a tour, and friends invited us to go on the tour, and I didn't do all my homework, but wound up in the day before the tour started in San Jose, the capital, in the National Museum. And like other Latin American countries, they have had their sense of turmoil. But in 1948, they had a revolt against the military coup. There was a military coup, and then the people came back, and there were talks about who was a communist and who was all this stuff. When they sat down, and the military had done the coup, the first thing that the non-military people said, we're going to do away with the military. We won't have a military who could ever do a coup again. And they did. And they don't have a military. And the museum is in the old Bastille. It's in downtown San Jose. And it makes all the difference in the world because they have to rely on their human nature to solve conflicts. Guatemala, soon after that, invaded Costa Rica. And they went to the World Court, and they got an arbitrator, and they adjudicated the issues, and there was no war.
How about that? Well, how did Guatemala agree to that?
Well, because the World Court is the World Court, and it's backed by the UN, so if Guatemala hadn't taken it, the UN was prepared to make the boundary line where they thought it ought to be in terms of its history and stuff. it was an interesting development because geographically the river dividing Guatemala and Costa Rica had changed its course in a flood, and then Guatemala said we want the river, the border 20 miles that way. They said not so fast. But that's an example from the Americas, and there's very few places in the world where you've got that kind of insight. And if you go forward 30 years after that, was when the president of Costa Rica got the Nobel Peace Prize for his work in Nicaragua and Guatemala. And that was another element of it. And it's the most stable economy of any economy in Central America. And the other insight that came out of that in the 50s and 60s is they made a determination to protect their environment. And they did that in response to the tourist phrase. So when you show up on a tourist bus full of gringos and you're a little embarrassed because you're there in the cloud forest, what you hear is, oh no, we're glad to see you because the tourist industry has saved our forest.
How about that?
And they're very aware of what that means for them. And I was struck by how gentle the message is versus the message we send from our country and the tragedies that have resulted. And I'm not saying Costa Rica is perfect. I'm just saying that you can certainly sense the difference when you're there.
Well, we talk about the just war theory.
Right.
And so I explained to them, well, these are the parameters that some people think if you're going to have a war, it can't be decided by one person, and you can't hurt civilians, and you have to have a good reason, which generally defense is considered a good reason. And then I talk about the pacifists and the Quakers, and we talk about that white feather story. So these are two possible routes you could choose. I have to be careful because, they go home, and I don't know what they hear at home, and I myself don't know how to parse all these different things out. But we try to cover some of that area. Right.
Well, wonderful. Now, we've got do you have a 5-minute story?
A 5-minute story?
A 5-minute story. I have to just double check my clock here, but
well, I hadn't planned to tell another one, but I have one that's kind of related to this.
Well, if you've got another one, we've got time for it.
You have something else you'd rather do?
I'd rather listen to you than anything I can think of right now.
That's not what I meant to say. You're up for it.
It was a good setup, though, wasn't it? Did you like the way she did that? Because, see, I could have volunteered to tell a story, and then she said, okay, Joe, but no, we're going to listen to Siri. I'm here every month.
All right. Well, now, I don't have this story, but we'll try. This is a sad story, and I haven't figured out where to fit it in, but it belongs in my lineup of the reasons people fight. All right. Once there was a Raja, a ruler of a certain small kingdom, and he had a son whom he was grooming to become Raja after him. Now, in the son's 10th year, the Raja engaged a new Diwan, or chief advisor. And when the Diwan's family moved into the royal compound, it was discovered that he had a 10-year-old son. And the boys became fast friends. The Raja's son was so happy to have someone sit with him and whisper during those tedious royal ceremonies, and to sit with him in front of those everlasting tutoring sessions on philosophy and history and government and literature and manners and music and swordsmanship and archery. Oh, now archery wasn't boring. The boys both loved archery. There was something about that combination of the physical strength and the precision. They just loved it, and they practiced every day, and they were soon quite skilled with the bow and arrows. Now, when the boys were 12 years old, they were allowed to accompany their parents on royal hunting expeditions. And when they were 14 years old, they were allowed to participate themselves and actually shoot their own bow and arrows. And when they were 15, they were allowed to go out hunting on their own. And so, that is all they did. Every day, sun up to sundown, they were out hunting. Well, this disturbed their parents because They weren't home studying, and the parents scolded them. They said, in just a few years, you're going to have responsibility, positions of importance in this kingdom, and you're going to need to know everything you're being taught in government and philosophy and history. You need to know this. Stay home and study. But the boys didn't listen. Every day they were out hunting. So the parents made them stay home. And the boys sat there in front of the tutors, but really they were drawing maps about where they would go next and discussing various bow techniques. So the parents separated them, each one in his own house. And then they spent their time moping with the servants, carrying messages back and forth. So the parents gave up and they said, well, it's a phase, they'll get over it. But weeks went by and still they were out hunting. So with regret, the Raja sent his servant to the marketplace with a message, an announcement to the people that whoever could break up the boys' friendship would be given a large reward. Well, nobody came forward. I don't know if they felt sorry for the boys or what, but nobody came forward. But a few days later, the servant in the marketplace overheard an old woman, and she said, I could break up the boys' friendship. I wouldn't do it, though, unless the Raja gave me a lot of money. Well, the servant corralled the old woman, brought her before the Raja. She said she could break up the boys' friendship for 50 rupees. Oh, said the Raja, if you can do that, I'll give you 100 rupees. All right, said the old woman, I need 2 strong soldiers, a drummer, a length of brand new silk, and a palanquin. A palanquin is one of those litters with the long sticks where you carry someone on a journey, the canopy. So the Raja got her these things, 2 soldiers, a drummer, a length of silk, a palanquin. She took the soldiers to the hovel where she lived. She cut up the silk. She covered the palanquin, new curtains, covered the pillows so the boys would not recognize this palanquin before, from something they'd seen before. She took it off. They wouldn't recognize it again. And then she got a winnowing fan. She put that on the pillows and the palanquin, and then she got a sizable chunk of manure, and she put that on the winnowing fan. Then she had the drummer drum ta ta taki da taki da taki da ta ta taki da taki da taki da taki da, and she followed, and the soldiers picked up the palanquin and they marched up into the town through the market street, taki da taki da taki da, back the other way, back the other way. We're running out of time, and so finally the boys come and they see this palanquin, and the soldiers have been instructed not to tell who's in the palanquin, and so they put it down, and the Raja's son looks in and says, oh, what is that? And the Diwan's son says, well, we'll just have to take the story out. But the old woman, she says, I can tell one person why I am carrying manure around in this palanquin. And the Diwan's son said, all right, you can tell me. And then, said the old woman, that person may tell one person. All right, so she says to the Diwan's son, she pretended to whisper. She leaves. The Raja's son said, what did she say? Well, she didn't say anything. She just pretended to whisper. Oh, come on, you can tell me. She said you could tell one person. She just pretended to whisper. I am telling you. What? You're taking her side. She told you not to tell me. I'm your best friend. Look, let's go get her. She'll tell you what she told me. No, she's already told you, and you've agreed to keep me in the dark. I told you. I command you. I'm the Raja's son. Tell me what she said. If you pull rank on me like that, I don't even want to be your friend. Well, fine, I don't want to be your friend either.
Whoomp, boom. And the debriefing on that one, my friends, you're going to have to do in your own living rooms. We're going to leave you there for this month and hope to see you here in April. Much good cheer. And thank you, Siri Allison.
Thank you, Joe. And I hope Kate feels better.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, but I can't tell you why. Seasons spinning round again,